Well, hello everyone. I'm Luke Moon, and you are watching Luke Reacts. Today, I'm going to talk about what's going on with Israel and Iran. There is a lot of rumbling that Israel is at some point going to attack Iran because Iran launched a bunch of rockets at it. Now, we're going to get into a little bit of backstory here about what's all going on behind the scenes because it really does matter where if we talk about what's happening now, you got to go back a little bit in time to better understand how did we get here in the first place. So now before we do that, I would really love it if you would like and subscribe to this show. We are almost at 10,000 subscribers to our YouTube channel, which is huge because 6 months ago we had like 1,700. So that's a big jump. And, I need you right there to click on that button to subscribe so we can get over the 10,000 mark. It'd be amazing. And I'd also like to remind you that the Fields Project is a 501c3 nonprofit organization that relies on gifts from people like you. So if you will consider that, we're heading into the gift giving time of year, and consider making a gift, a donation to the Fields Project. It'd be amazing. And how you can do that will be in the description below. Okay, so what are we talking about here? We're talking about the fact that on October 1st, there was a rocket attack against Israel from Iran. Not the slow moving drones that we saw in April, the 12-hour notice that, this rockets are coming your way. No, Israel had 12-minute notice that ballistic missiles were on their way, and the whole country ran to bomb shelters. I have a friend who, told me his daughter was outside and didn't know where to go, and he was, freaking out, and his wife was freaking out, and they were very stressed because they didn't know, like nobody knew. I mean, we were sitting in our office in New York City, and got word that Israel has 12 minutes and everybody's gone to bomb shelters. And we turned on the news, and it's like, pictures of Tel Aviv and other places in Israel. And people were, waiting for, like, is there a building going to explode? Is a rocket going to hit it? And so that happened. And it happened because Israel took out the leader of one of Iran's proxy organizations called Hezbollah. And this guy Nasrallah was hanging out with his buddies in a bunker down below, and Israel just took him out. Took out not only Nasrallah, but took out a bunch of other, like, top 20 commanders. And something like there was like $1 billion in cash and about 2,000 pounds of gold also in that bunker. Poof, gone. Okay, so they're like the prize fighter of Iran, Hezbollah, was knocked out, and knocked down at least, maybe not out, but knocked down for sure. Okay, and that goes after Israel for the last year has been pummeling Hamas, which is another proxy. And over on the Red Sea, the Houthis, they keep trying to, bluster about, and they keep, attacking oil shipments in the Red Sea. Surprisingly, I have yet to hear, um, Greta Thunberg, whatever her name is, decrying the fact that the Houthis, the party that are aligned with the Palestinian cause, all the kafia stuff, is seeming unbothered by the fact that they keep bombing oil tankers and spilling millions of gallons of oil into the Red Sea. Oh, no big deal, Luke. You're on the wrong side of history. Okay, whatever. Just shows you a bunch of fakers. Okay. Now, the thing is that, because of this attack on Hezbollah and, some of the other leaders of Iran's proxies got taken out, Iran has to respond. They got to save some face. It's how it works. And so what do? They launch a bunch of rockets at Israel, and a bunch of them none of them actually strike their targets. They all miss or they get shot down. For the second time, y'all, the only people to die in the land of Israel from these rocket launching attacks from Iran has been Arabs. In the first instance, it was an Arab girl, a Bedouin girl, who was killed when the remnants of a rocket fell on her house and she was killed. And then in the last instance, there's a lot of video of this. It was really rather unfortunate. This dude walking down the street in Jericho, all of a sudden a 20-foot long by 2-foot tube of steel falls on him, and he dies. So only 2 people. Now the irony of this is the place where the most deaths happened was actually in Iran, because one of the ballistic missiles that was supposed to be shot out at Iran ended up exploding on the ground, killing 5 Iranian terrorists and injuring like 20. Okay, so there was actually more people died in Iran from launching a rocket at Israel than died in Israel. Now, I don't know. You read in the Bible, there's these stories of like, take the story of Gideon and the 300, right? What was like, he had this army, and they're going to go against this giant army, like 250,000 or something, some huge amount of enemy forces, if you will. And they get their army, and they're going, and there's like, and God's like, everybody needs to drink at the water, and those that lap like a dog are treated one way, and those that put their hand to their mouth with the water are those are the ones that get to go with him. And then anybody who's afraid can leave. And so Gideon is left with 300 fighters, and they're like, put some torches in clay pots, and then bang the clay pots and break them. And as a result of all that, all the enemy soldiers kill themselves or kill each other. They think this army is massive, and they all die. That's basically the super paraphrased version of the story of Gideon. Go read it for yourself. It's a book of Judges where you can find it in the Bible. Anyways, there's that. It's a miracle. It's a miracle because all these enemies of Israel died. And there's another one where it was like a plague, it wipes them out, an army. And, in these instances, Israel, it's not a point in which Israel has been, committing idolatry for generations, and they're disobeying God. No, they're in the favor of the Lord. And as a result, God protects them. And I am of the mind that that's what we're seeing with these rockets come from Iran. Yes, it's Iron Dome stopping them, but it's Iron Dome stopping 100% of them. And no Jews die in the process. That seems strange to me. It seems miraculous, one could say. Well, I could say it because I'm talking. So that's a big part of this. Okay, so Iran launches these rockets. Now everybody now is waiting for Israel to respond. How are they going to respond? Where are they going to blow up? Who are they going to attack? Where is it going to go? Are they going to go after the oil fields, the nuclear facilities, the military sites? Are they going to who are they going to go? And when is it going to happen? How long are they going to wait? Now, I want you to hold on for a minute and let me walk through some history here because I think it is important. It's important to, again, recognize where this fits in the context of the whole region and what's been going on for a while before we get to, whether Israel will attack Iran's nuclear facilities. So you have this situation in which, for a long time, the primary unifying feature of the Middle East was called Arab nationalism. Now, Arab nationalism was this attempt to, just that, unify the Middle East around Arab identity. And this happened after the fall of the Ottoman Empire. The Ottoman Empire controlled most of the Middle East, and after World War I, it all fell apart. And then, the European powers divided up the region, and the French got a bit, and the British got a bit, and they broke those into countries, and it's what you have now, basically. Okay. Arab nationalism rose out of that kind of movement, out of the post-Ottoman movement. And it was largely driven by people who wanted to be secular. And also there was a bunch of Christians. They were Christian, oftentimes in mostly just name only, like as in their last name or their first name designated them a Christian, but they weren't like Christian by belief. They were Christian by heritage, which is common in the region, mind you. Now, you had Arab nationalism kind of rise up out of the ashes of the Ottoman Empire as being the unifying feature. There was actually even a state for a while in which Syria and Egypt joined together called the United Arab Republic. Okay, it didn't last very long, but you get the idea there. There was this, Arabism was the unifying feature. And just like Zionism was a nationalist movement, so was Arab nationalism. So this goes on a track for a long time, okay? And then it begins to kind of, it began to lose its way, and it got really pummeled by the United States, mind you, because the Ba'athist Party of Saddam Hussein, if you remember Saddam Hussein, the dictator of Iraq who was part of the Ba'athist regime. The Ba'athists were a secular Arab nationalist party in not only Israel, in Iraq, but also in Syria and the region. Now, Saddam Hussein, we fought Saddam Hussein as the United States twice, 91 and then in 2001, 2002. And once Saddam Hussein was defeated in the Second Iraq War, at that point, the U.S. banned the Ba'athist Party. Okay, so we were actually helped responsible for getting rid of the Arab nationalist movement. And, power can't handle a vacuum. And so what filled it? What filled it was Muslim nationalism. Okay. And what you had then was, which form of Islamic nationalism are we going to embrace? Is it going to be the Shia form or the Sunni form? And what happened was, the result was a civil war between Sunni and Shia Muslim organizations and forces and countries and armies and all that sort of stuff. And that forms the background of the movement, of the point in history we find ourselves, is this ongoing, sometimes hot, sometimes cold, civil war of Islam in the region. Now, you're like, look, well, who cares about this? Well, you have these things like the Abraham Accords. Before October 7th, in the world of October 6th, 2023, I was thinking that in the next, like a week later, that there was a 60 to 70% chance that the Saudi Arabia was going to join the Abraham Accords. Now, how do I know that? Because I was at an event earlier that week in which the leaders of the Arab nationalist movement, sorry, not the Arab national, the leaders of the Abraham Accord organizations, of the nations that were part of the Abraham Accords in the United States, and the organizations that were encouraging it and promoting it and fostering the Abraham Accords, those leaders were all going to go to an event in Israel that was going to start on the 9th of October. And it seemed a very good chance. I was in the 70% chance range that Saudi Arabia was going to join the Abraham Accords. Why? Because the Abraham Accords had one very interesting feature. They were all Sunni. They were all on the one side together, united against the other Islamic side, which is the Shia. And Saudi Arabia represents the primary, it's the primary engine, the primary like focal point for Sunni Islam. And Iran is the primary engine of Shia Islam. And so Saudi Arabia and Iran are the primary groups actually at war with each other. Okay. And everybody else is just kind of like varying degrees of add-on to them. It's like the United States and the Soviet Union in like the 70s and 80s, in which, yeah, there was countries that aligned with the Soviet Union, and there was countries that aligned with the United States. And there was a Cold War in some places. That Cold War was a little bit hotter than others. The Soviet Union in Afghanistan in the 80s, in which the U.S. Was supplying, surface to air missiles to the Mujahideen, the fighters against the Soviets, right? All that was happening in the 80s. So you have the same kind of thing happening now in the Middle East. And so Saudi Arabia was looking like it was going to join the Abraham Accords, and the other countries that had already joined, UAE and Morocco and Sudan and Bahrain and all these countries, they were already on board. And then you had, the Egyptians had already made a peace deal with Israel. The Jordanians made a peace deal with Israel. And so you basically had the majority of the Sunni states in the region all joining with Israel, because Israel had the best guns, right? They had the best fighters. They were the ones that were like, most willing to take out the Syrian, the Iranian convoy of weapons. Okay. Another place this proxy war played out was in Yemen, between the forces that were aligned with Saudi Arabia and the forces that were aligned with Iran. Now, when the Biden administration came into office, one of the first things it did was take the Houthis, which is the Iran side. They took them off the terror. There's a list of terrorist organizations that U.S. holds, and it actually is not just a list to have a list. It actually it comes with consequences to being on that list. So the Houthis were designated a terrorist organization by the United States, and the Biden administration took them off, and at the same time told the Saudis that they could not use any American weaponry that they purchased to help the pro-Saudi Yemenites, the people in Yemen, who were trying to hold back the Houthi rebels. Okay, so you had this proxy war playing out in Yemen, and the U.S., in a sense, picked the side. We picked the side of Iran by taking them off the list and saying and restraining the Saudis from being involved. And it didn't do anything other than make things worse. But what do you expect when the advisors to the Biden administration are aligned, are pro Tehran? It's gonna fall out that way. Right. So you have this civil war taking place between Sunni and Shia Muslims in the region, and this is plays a big part in how when you're thinking about the countries, the region as a whole, the place of Iran, you got to remember this because it's super important. It plays such an important role in how people are making decisions. The U.S. is not particularly helpful here because Iran's nuclear had a nuclear ambitions for a long time, and under the Obama administration, there was a negotiated deal that would basically said, "All right, Iran, we will let you do do nuclear power, but not nuclear weapons." And it seemed like a noble idea, except the Iran, if they wanted to do a nuclear power facility, they could have purchased it from a host of countries that would have sold them like not only the technology, it would have built it for them. The Russians offered, the Germans offered. There's a bunch of people offered to build them a nuclear power plant, but they're like, no, we want to build our own. We're not going to build nuclear weapons. We're just going to build a nuclear power plant because we're like that. We're basically a desert floating on oil, but it's really important that we have nuclear power because we want to power our electric cars with that nuclear power and whatever. Come on, this is so dumb. Nobody will believe that. But the people that were advising the Obama administration did, and they convinced basically the world to sign on to this deal called the JCPOA, which is I don't remember what that stands for. Basically, called the nuclear deal. The Iran nuclear deal. And the deal only lasted, it was only supposed to last 10 years. So it would have ended now anyways. But the thing is that the United States, when Obama left office and Trump came into office, he pulled out of the nuclear deal. But one of the features of the nuclear deal was there was a bunch of sanctions that were put on Iran because it kept funding all these terrorist organizations all over the world, and especially around Israel. Hezbollah and Hamas to begin with were two, but also were involved in this war in Yemen with the Houthis. They were involved there was like Shia forces in Syria who had aligned with Assad against the Sunnis in Syria. They had taken over a good bit of Iraq and were pushing back the Sunnis in Iraq. And so you had this, it was really playing itself out quite nicely in a very violent way. But what you had was when the sanctions were lifted, there was a bunch of Iranian money that had been sitting in bank accounts in the United States, in other countries, and just collecting interest. We're talking tens of billions of dollars, just collecting interest year after year after year after year, right? And as soon as the banks were the sanctions relief happened, all of that money flooded back into Iran, and in the tens of billions of dollars flooded back into Iran, hundreds actually, at the same time. And what I would say is perhaps a very cynical move. Obama sold to the Saudis $400 billion worth of weapons from the United States weapon manufacturers. So you had suddenly, say, $400 billion worth of sanction relief flooded back into Iran, and we sold $400 billion worth of weapons to the Saudis. What do you think is going to happen? Anybody with a brain in their head? What do you think is going to happen? It's literally going to light the region on fire. Why? Because you suddenly flood everybody with both cash and guns. And it was such a disaster. So you had all these proxies suddenly flush with cash. The Syria war takes on a new level. The Yemenite war takes on a new, like the bloodshed in Yemen was a whole new level. And so when Trump comes back comes into power in 2016, one of the first things he does is he cancels the Iran nuclear deal and he puts the sanctions back on Iran. And suddenly the lock is back. And it takes a little bit of while. It takes a while because it's a lot of money they were given, and they got to get through that. But the sanctions are tough. They don't allow Iran to sell oil anywhere. They don't allow any money to get to Iran. Iran is getting weaker and weaker and weaker and weaker. At the same time, the Abraham Accord is happening, and this unifying of the Sunnis under in making peace deals with Israel, and it seems like this is the future. Okay, Biden gets back in, sanctions get eased, money, more funds go back to Iran. Suddenly, Hamas and Hezbollah have money again. They come after Israel on October 7th, and in the north they're launching hundreds and hundreds of rockets. People have to move away from the border, and it's not getting any better at all. And Israel is keeps getting pushed and pushed and pushed by the Biden administration because the election's coming, and they're trying to have it both ways. They don't want to lose the Jewish vote supportive of Israel. They don't want to lose the Arab vote that's supportive of Gaza, and so they're trying their best to kind of have it both ways, and they're pissing off everybody. And then and Israel's like not playing along because they don't see Biden as being strong. As soon as Kamala Harris becomes the presidential nominee for the Democratic Party, and Biden seems like he's kind of slowing down, everybody's like, we just got to do what we got to do to keep our people safe and to do what we got to do, because there's a ton of people moved out of a strip of northern Israel where they can't go back to their homes. They've been living in like hotels for almost a year. Who wants to do that? Nobody. Right? So it's like Israel says to its people, listen, we're going to have you back in your homes at the end of the High Holy Days, which is coming up actually in about 9 days. And and so Israel just starts pummeling Hezbollah. Took out the leadership. They did this great thing with the beepers and the walkie-talkies, and suddenly everything's about to explode on Hezbollah. Any officer with Hezbollah is finding their electronics very risky to hang on to because they keep blowing up. And so we get to this point where we're at right now, where Israel has said to its people, we're going to get you back home. And that's the deal. And they have 9 days to do it. Now, again, on October 1st, Iran launches basically anywhere between 180 to 200 ballistic missiles at Israel. And again, like none of them make it. None of them kill any Jews. One Arab is killed in Jericho. That's it. But Israel's got to respond. So what does it do? Who does it go after? Hezbollah is, on its back foot, getting pummeled. Hamas is almost nothing left of Hamas. It's at this point, Israel has announced that Hamas is it's a group of ragtag guerrilla fighters, but there's no infrastructure. There's no structure. There's no like command and control structure. It's just a bunch of people who happen to come across, ammunition and keep shooting at the Israelis. Okay, that's all that's left of Hamas at this point. So what's it going to do with Iran? Now, There's a couple of places where Iran could get hit and it would be very painful for them. There's a couple of there's one port on the Red Sea where Iran exports most of its illegal, mind you, oil, uh, and that's like 80% of Iran's oil exports come out of that one spot. That's a very tempting target, okay? Because that would be costly, expensive, because you got to rebuild and you got to put out the fires and all that sort of stuff. Okay. There's the Iran nuclear facilities, like the uranium enrichment facilities where they're doing the tech, where they're building, and so there's those facilities, and then there's some weapons manufacturing, some rocket making, drone making, that kind of thing that's happening. Okay, all those are targets. Obviously, the leadership of Iran could potentially be a target, but you don't want to, you got to watch and make sure that you're not making a martyr out of Khomeini. So you got to, there's a certain degree, the difference between, Hezbollah was always a militia that, had some political power, but it was still a militia. And so it was not seen as being, it was not like taking out the proper head of a government. It was like taking out, the head of a rogue part of the government, which is different. So, what does Israel do? What should Israel do? What do you think Israel should do? When should they do it? I mean, like, how many times does Israel need to get rockets launched at it before Israel can be like, okay, or the world can acknowledge that Israel has the right to do it, to do what it needs to do? Well, like, why after the first one wasn't Israel allowed to do what it wants? How about the second one? No, and so now the Biden administration is saying listen, you need to agree that you're not going to take out the Iran nuclear facilities or the oil, their primary oil export facility. Those two things are off limits. That's what the Biden administration told the government of Israel. And why? Why did he say that? Well, one is, it seems that the greatest fear of the West is escalation, not the end to a conflict. Right? Like, it seems that, they can manage the terrorists, they can't manage the escalation. And so the fear is the escalation, not the terrorists. Even though the terrorists are just doing this, like, been doing this for a while. Okay. And so Iran is needs to get hit somehow, because Israel can't not hit them. They have to respond, because in the West, we're so concerned about we want, obviously we want peace, but our perception is 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 not like that of the region of the Middle East. In the Middle East, you have to appear strong, because if you appear weak, you're a target. If Israel looks weak at all in any instance, it will be more of a target, not less. And so Israel, in order to be seen as strong in the region, needs to be brutal. But that goes against the Western orientation. So you see this, like, there's a little bit of asymmetry there between what needs to happen in order to have kind of stability in the region and what the West wants, and what those are, and when we're connected with the West. And so the thing is, like, it should be in the interest not only of the United States, but also the rest of the world, that Iran, like, this would be a great time to go after the Iran nuclear weapons facilities. It'd be perfect. Why? Because Iran launched a bunch of rockets at Israel, and Israel has the right to respond back in every kind of, like, in the way of the world, if you will. And yet that's the U.S. is saying no, 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 no. But it's in the interests of the West if if Iran's nuclear weapon facilities goes kaboom. Because here's what happens when Iran gets a bomb. I'll tell you. Okay? Within, I guarantee, like a month max, the Saudis or the Egyptians will have a bomb as well. Okay? They cannot allow to be offset by deterrence. And if the Saudis and the Iranians both have bombs, then you'll have a scenario in which those two countries ratchet up the rhetoric and look for an excuse to launch those rockets at each other. How do I know this? How do you know this, Luke? Is there any examples in history? Why, yes, there are. So there was obviously the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962, I believe, is when the Soviets put nuclear weapons in, or I think I can't remember if they got there or were going to get there in Cuba. The Cuban Missile Crisis was what it was called, and it was like the first time that like the U.S. and the Soviet Union looked like they were going to, launch nuclear weapons at each other. I mean, like when I was a kid, we weren't worried about mass shooters in schools. I was grow up in Seattle, so we were worried about earthquakes and nuclear weapons going off. And it was a real thing. Like we would have drills where you get under your desk, and prepare just in case there was a earthquake or a nuclear weapon went off in the area. And it was a real thing. It was a real concern. And that was all through the 80s with the US and the Soviet Union. Okay. India and Pakistan both got nuclear weapons about a month apart from each other. They both tested them. The world, I mean, they weren't supposed to, mind you. They weren't supposed to be nuclear powers. But how did they do that? How did they become nuclear powers? Well, it's because not everybody listens to what the UN says. When they want it, they want it. And there was a conflict in Kashmir. And Kashmir is a disputed territory between India and Pakistan. It's kind of there's Muslims involved and Hindus involved, and there's religion and territory and all this. Sound familiar? Anyways, there was an incident in Kashmir, and that kind of escalated and kept escalating and escalating and escalating, and then it looked like these new nuclear powers, Pakistan and India, were going to throw rockets at each other, nuclear rockets, nuclear bombs. And it got so bad. So at the time, I was a missionary, and I served with Youth with a Mission, and we had teams of young people who were serving in India and Pakistan. And in 2001, and we were actually, I remember pulling teams out of India and Pakistan as fast as we could because it looked like they were going to go to war. That's how bad it was. Okay. We only need one of those in the world before it causes, catastrophic, not only catastrophic death, but, lingering problems into the future. I mean, just think like Chernobyl. That was an accident. Imagine that on purpose. Imagine, a nuclear bomb going off in Delhi or Hyderabad, or, we're talking millions of people dead. And, over what? A piece of land, actually. But they're, and India and Pakistan are in the similar way that the Islamic civil war is taking place in the Middle East. So like India and Pakistan are not friends. They it ebbs and flows on their intensity towards each other. And yet they were very close. And so Iran gets the bomb, and Egypt or Saudi Arabia get it next. And then they start saber rattling. And then there's some fight somewhere, some border dispute. They're not really close, but they start kind of, their proxies do something, and it gets worse and it gets worse. And like it's it's a certain level of, like, those, it's like, chicken, playing chicken, cars going at each other at 100 miles an hour and hoping the other one swerves. But what if they don't? Both will die. And so there's a certain there's a whole bunch of people in the United States and Israel who are like, hey guys, now would be a great time to take out the Iranian nuclear facilities. It would be. So, but earlier this week, supposedly now, Netanyahu, Benjamin Netanyahu, the president or the prime minister of Israel, and Biden, they agreed that Israel would not attack the oil refinery and port of Iran or the Iranian nuclear facilities. Now, that was reported in Wall Street Journal and Politico and all over the news that, like, Netanyahu and Biden had agreed to this. Now, I don't know. Call me suspicious of that, because it's like, why would you take off the possibility of the most important strategic opportunity to take out what should be taken out? Iran cannot be allowed to get a nuclear weapon. It cannot. Because it's just, I mean, even if it was a totally stable and rational country, it shouldn't do it, because it's like we don't need more countries having nuclear weapons. We need less countries having nuclear weapons, but that's not how the world works. And so we got to recognize, if Iran gets it, so does somebody else. And that somebody else could be just as potentially trigger happy, angry, who knows, like the mood strikes them. And the next thing you know, millions of people are dying under mushroom clouds. That would be terrible. And so, like, Israel took out the Iraq. Iraq had a nuclear weapons. They were trying to get the nuclear weapon, and Iran took them out. No, sorry, Israel took them out. Like, great, one of those like daring flight operations, bombed it, and they never started it again. Libya was actually in the process of obtaining nuclear weapons at one point, and that blew up as well. I can't remember if it was the Israelis, somebody blew it. It was a friendly move, but as a result, like Libya, Muammar Gaddafi, who was a real pain in the world's behind for a long time, as well. He never ended up getting nuclear weapons, and that was a good thing. Do we want the Saudis or the Egyptians or anybody else to get them in the region? No. Why would we do that? But we especially don't want Iran to have them, because then, in order to have that deterrent, the Sunnis are going to have to do it too, and then you can get this violence. We don't want that, right? So everybody's waiting around, waiting and waiting. I don't think that Biden and Netanyahu agreed to that. I think that was a signal. I would think it was a signal, like, to Iran, hey, don't worry, we're not going to attack those things. Right. Okay. You can listen. We agreed, the U.S. and Israel. We agreed that we're not going to attack your nuclear sites, so you can stand down your security, and you'll be fine. We're going to leave that alone. We're not going to touch it at all. Actually, we'll help clean it. We'll send over some janitors. It probably got dirty with all the extra soldiers you got around there. We got your back. Okay, don't worry about it. We'll get some other facilities, maybe some rocket launching facility. Like, it's just some other stuff. Don't worry. We're not going to get the two primary targets that would benefit everything and make this whole thing much easier to deal with. We're not going to do that. Okay, sure, you're not. I don't believe that for a second. I'm sorry. I'm sure it was great reporting, and I'm sure that somebody said that. I'm sure everybody's agreeing that that was said, and everybody's on the same page. Except I don't. I don't believe it. I don't believe it. We'll see. We'll see. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm right. But what I do know is that Iran shouldn't have the nuclear bombs. Iran's nuclear facilities need to get taken out. And I'm sure the elections in America is playing into decision making here by the Biden administration. I'm sure that regardless of who wins in about 3 weeks, the lame duck season will be particularly difficult for the world because there'll be a lot of people who are going to use that opportunity to set up whatever next administration comes into power. And either that setup can be making things easier or making things harder, depending on who's easier and who's harder. Like it's the American elections is going to has ripple effects around the world, and that's not going away. So here we are. We don't yet know when or how or what Israel is going to do to Iran, but they have to do something. And my sense is that it's what they do is not going to is going to be pretty significant. It'll probably not be what people expect. I mean, how many people expected beepers to go off in people's hands, taking out 4,000 Hezbollah leadership commanders? Like literally, it was so genius. I mean, it was so genius. One of the great espionage. Like when the movie comes out, it'll be like it'll be a #1 box office because it will just be such a cool espionage story of how that happened. But I expect Israel has some grand plan, and they're working towards it. And when the time is right, they're going to do it. They might do it before. I mean, what you should be thinking about, like, and write this in the comments, and I'll read them, and we can kind of either I'll respond to another Luke Reacts, or I'll just respond to you there on the comments. Like, does it benefit Israel to attack them before the elections or after the elections? If they attack them before, does that help the Biden administration and the incoming potential Harris administration? Or does it hurt the potential incoming Trump administration? Who does it help? Who does it hurt? I guarantee that that's part of the calculation in Israel. Same with Iran. What are they thinking? They're thinking about how it plays into the elections as well. So here you are, if you're in America watching this, our elections matter. And so you should take them seriously and you should go vote. And yeah, stay tuned because it is unclear. I'm like a crystal ball seeing into the future about how this is going to play out. But I know Israel is going to do something and Iran's going to respond. So we still have a ways to go in this civil war between the Sunnis and Shias, and that's not going to go away soon. And again, whenever you're thinking about these individual conflicts, you got to make sure you step back and see what's going on in the broader region. It really does matter. It really does bring a bit more clarity, and you go, oh, that makes okay. So I see these groups are aligned. Okay, that kind of stuff is really helpful. So keep that in mind, and let me know what you think about whether or not Bibi Netanyahu should attack Israel before the U.S. elections or after. I'd be curious to get your thoughts. Write them in the comments. And after you've written in the comments, be sure to like and subscribe. And if you're inclined, donate some money to the Fuels Project. All of which are great. All of which will help us a lot. And stay tuned for more because more will come. Thank you very much. Thanks for watching Luke Reacts. Have a good day.